What's up? It's your boy God Will Gamble. And even though I'm wearing a hat from the wrong sport, I'm going to give you some quick hits for Week 15 of the 2020 NFL season over on Fanduel. So first things first, a few games that I find interesting for this week. I'll start off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Atlanta Falcons, currently projected for a 48 and a half over-under. Buccaneers are 6-point favorite. And this is interesting because the over-under has fallen by 3 points since the beginning of the week. And that's despite 61% of the bets coming in on the over. So now with anything like this, obviously, I always want to take this as a guide. It's not the end-all be-all. But this is usually a signal that there's a large amount of money coming in on the under in this game. Now, with no Julio for Atlanta, we've seen that the Atlanta offense has been much more inefficient and less capable of putting up high totals without Julio. So to me, that would make me a pretty big downer on this game in particular. Not that I don't think that you can play some players from this game, but in general, I wouldn't really be looking to stack this game overall, particularly the Atlanta side. The second game that I find interesting is the Jets and the Rams. So this is notable because it's a 44 point over under, so not usually a game that we would be looking to target. And the Rams are 17 and a half points favorites, which is a huge spread. We've seen a number of these throughout the season, given some of the really bad teams at the bottom of the standings. We're putting up really poor performances, and the Jets are one of those teams. What's interesting about this is that the Rams throughout the season and historically with Sean McVay as the coach have been extremely game script dependent. This type of setup generally sets up to be a very run-heavy game script. So keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to that in a few. And then the last game down here is the Chiefs and the Saints. So the 52-point over-under, 3-point favorites for the Chiefs. And this is notable, one, because Drew Brees is expected to be back for the Saints. So that definitely plays well to this game being competitive. We're looking at a high over-under and a potential competitive point spread. So that leads to a potential back and forth where we could see a lot of points. And I think this is by far the best game if you're looking at game stacks, in particular with a rising over-under as well as a lot of bets coming in on the over. So I think that's a good sign for this game in particular. You probably didn't need me to tell you that, but I think that this is by far the best game stack if you're looking that way. So to start off, I mention a few quarterbacks here, and I'll start off at the top with Patrick Mahomes. So the Saints defense has been really strong this season, although we did see last week that there were some holes that Jalen Hurts was able to exploit, and Patrick Mahomes is one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the league. So we should expect him to be able to put up a similar, if not better, performance, despite the Saints defense being relatively strong. What we've also seen is that the Chiefs' offense is so potent with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey, among other options there, that even when Mahomes has a subpar game, he's still throwing to a number of weapons that are going to allow him to have a relatively high floor. In addition to that, he does have some rushing upside from time to time as well, and tends to be one of the more efficient passers in the league. So definitely like Patrick Mahomes up here at the top. Think that, as I mentioned before, you can obviously go there for some stacks, and I'll probably be returning to the Chiefs for some of these other positions as well. Secondly, I think we can look to Lamar Jackson this week. So had a pretty big bounce back performance on Monday night against the Browns. Now, it's notable that he only threw the ball 17 times in that game, and that's the second game in a row where he hasn't really thrown the ball a ton. But we have seen the rushing upside be there that we usually expect. So, 3 touchdowns on the ground in the last 2 games. I think given the high total, that you can definitely look Lamar's way. Now, for me personally, I do prefer to stack my quarterbacks. But for this particular setup, given that the Ravens are big favorites against the Jaguars, I think that you can either look to Mahomes as a player that you can play naked, or you can play with more of a skinny stack, so playing him with one player on his team. And I think that there's a pretty good option in particular that you could skinny stack Lamar Jackson with. So I'd look there for him. And lastly, if you're looking to pay down a little bit at quarterback, I mentioned this initially in that Drew Brees is going to be very likely to return for New Orleans. Brees makes for a viable option given that the over-under for the Saints and Chiefs is expected to be the highest on the board, and in addition to that, be a competitive game. And Brees also raises the prospects of the pass catchers in general. And given that he doesn't run a whole lot, he makes for an extremely stackable option, whereas if Brees has a game that hits a ceiling, it's very likely that one or two of his pass catchers also got you a ceiling type of performance as well. Now, moving on to running back, we obviously have to start at the top with Derrick Henry. He reminded us last week that we're officially in December, and that's the time when Derrick Henry eats. So given the large spread in favor of the Tennessee Titans, which should project to a more run-heavy game script, Derrick Henry is in an awesome matchup. Now, he's going to be very popular, so you're not really getting a leg up on the field there, so just keep that in mind. But the large workload and efficiency should work out in Derrick Henry's favor, and he has a upside from a rushing standpoint that's generally unmatched on the slate. Secondly, if you're paying it down a little bit, and I think if you want to get a little bit more creative, Alvin Kamara is an option that might not be as popular given the way that he's produced with Taysom Hill under center. But we have to keep in mind that Taysom Hill in general looked much less comfortable dumping the ball down to Kamara, even in the game last week where he threw an interception, tried to rifle a ball off of Alvin Kamara's chest. So the Brees addition to the lineup, I think, is a strong upgrade for Kamara. And given that his salary is depressed, as well as the popularity potentially, I think that this is a week that we can look back to Alvin Kamara as a strong play at running back. And lastly, the most popular value running back on the board is clearly going to be Cam Akers. Cam Akers has shown over the last 2 weeks that he has taken over the backfield for the Rams. So given that the Rams have a very run-heavy game script here, that supports Cam Akers being able to put up a reasonably high performance, especially compared to the salary at $6,700. So definitely like Cam Akers. Again, he's going to be popular as well. So if you're looking for some pivots, I think a player like Kenyon Drake could be a strong pivot at that salary. But Cam Akers is far and away the best value on the board, and especially at running back. Moving over to wide receiver and starting at the top, I think that the best option on the board at the top, given the matchup, is going to be Deandre Hopkins. Now, we've seen over the course of the season that his volume production has been very steady, and he's received a very high number of targets. Given that the Phillies secondary is pretty banged up, DeAndre Hopkins could be in a very plus matchup against cornerbacks that aren't of the caliber to be able to match up. In addition to that, even if Darius Slay is able to play, that's still a plus matchup for Hopkins, so I wouldn't be concerned at all about the defense being able to stop Hopkins. It's more about getting the volume there, and Kyler Murray looked better last week than he had the last few weeks dealing with the shoulder injury, so that bodes well for Hopkins, and I think that he's the best option up here at the top. Now, paying down a little bit, I think that the clear sort of mid-tier option for me is Michael Thomas. Now, we've seen with Taysom Hill in the lineup that Michael Thomas still gets a similar workload as far as his targets. Now, Brees doesn't throw the ball down the field much at all, but in a game script that projects to be pretty competitive, I think that we can look Michael Thomas's way. Now, he was dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. I don't think that's much of a concern. And we've seen him be efficient regardless of who's throwing the football. And due to Taysom Hill being in the lineup, I think that the Saints pass catchers, and in particular Kamara and Thomas, have pretty depressed salaries. So I think we can take advantage of that this week and go into Michael Thomas, particularly in Brees stacks as well. And now, if you're paying down a bit, I think that the clear pay down option for me is going to be Russell Gage. Now, I mentioned the Atlanta offense as a whole being a little bit of a downer without Julio Jones. The upside is that Russell Gage does have a consistent role, regardless of whether Julio plays or not. And we've seen him get relatively consistent target shares, and especially in games where Julio hasn't played, that target share has gone up. That hasn't exactly come with very good efficiency, so that's the reason why I wouldn't be too high on Russell Gage and the Atlanta offense as a whole. However, getting 7 and 8 targets at a salary of 5,700 is really solid. And even though he does have a tough matchup, I think that the high volume could work to mitigate that somewhat. So Russell Gage, more of a volume play, not really much in the way of efficiency. If he does happen to be pretty efficient, then I think that they could bode even better, and that could give him a relatively high ceiling here that a lot of players in this range just don't have. So I think Russell Gage is solid. Okay. At tight end, we normally refer to it as a barren wasteland. We obviously have to start at the top with Travis Kelsey. We've seen Travis Kelsey just has an unmatched volume potential compared to other tight ends. Getting upwards of 10 targets in multiple games, 5 of the last 6. That's just a target share that most tight ends just don't have access to. In addition to that, he's 127 yards away from breaking the tight end receiving mark, and it's possible if he gets close that Kansas City and Mahomes could just work to get him there. They usually don't have to do much work to try to get him over the hump, but I think that is a narrative that may potentially come into play. But Travis Kelsey, by far the number one option at tight end. I think if you're looking for a number 2 option, you don't really have to go much further in salary. I think that it's Mark Andrews. Now, you can see clearly the difference here in the target share compared to what we just saw previously for Travis Kelsey. So you have to keep that in mind. However, he does see a high amount of targets in the red zone for Baltimore. So given that they're projected for a high total, I think that Mark Andrews could be in for a solid workload and performance. And in addition to that, you can stack him with Lamar Jackson, given that the tight end is a position that's generally scarce as far as players with really high upside. So I think Mark Andrews is a solid option there. Now, if you're paying down a bit, it's a little ugly, and I think that clearly Cole Kmet is going to be the best option there. But I think if you're looking to get a little bit different, that Dalton Schultz, despite sort of the ugly game log here, should be in play. And on the team, he's tied for the highest red zone target share on Dallas. Now, he won't be popular at all, and if you're paying down a tight end, you're probably just trying to snipe a touchdown. And he gives you a unpopular pivot off of Kmet, who could potentially be more popular for people paying down. So I think that Dalton Schultz is worth a look, given that he can perform if given opportunity in the red zone. Last and also least is defense. As I'm noted for defense, I generally like to pay down. It's extremely random as far as predicting defensive performance on a week-to-week basis. So I don't really love a lot of the pay down options here. So I think that the first one that I do like are the Buccaneers. Now, when you're targeting a defense, you just normally like to try to get a defense that can get some pressure and get to the quarterback. That pressure can lead to scoring points in the way of sacks, but also interceptions, fumbles, and potentially touchdown opportunities that can give a defense an outlier performance. We saw last week the Buccaneers got 6 sacks on Kirk Cousins. So I think that with Atlanta missing Julio and not being as efficient, this gives the Buccaneers a chance to be one of the better, if not the best, defense plays on the board, and they're probably not going to be all that popular. So that's where I would look if you're looking for a slightly less popular and slightly more cheap defense. So there you have it. Those are my quick hits for Week 15's NFL main slate on Fanduel. If you enjoyed this video, definitely give it a like and subscribe to our content if you loved the video. That definitely helps the channel continue to grow. In addition to that, hit the notification bell if you'd like to be notified when new content comes up. I'll be putting together some NBA content pretty soon on the channel, so hopefully that'll be pretty exciting for all of you. In addition to that, I do go live on Twitch on Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern. The link will be in the description. And if you enjoyed the content, I'd love to have you join me there. So hope this gives you a little bit of a leg up for this week's NFL slate. And best of luck with your lineups and the rest of the season.